This is the ERP Advisor.
Today's episode, knowing when to upgrade from your legacy ERP. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Knowing When to Upgrade from Your Legacy ERP. Our presentation today will cover the following learning objectives: top reasons to replace your legacy ERP system, impact of legacy technology, impact of legacy technology on talent attraction and retention, the most common change management risks when upgrading legacy ERP, and how to manage your workforce's expectations and responses to new systems. Today's presentation is valid for one free CPE credit. In order to receive CPE credit, each attendee is required to attend the full 50-minute presentation, as well as engage and answer all the poll questions asked throughout the presentation. If you are needing CPE credit for today's presentation, please leave your name in the chat of this Zoom, or please send an email to julia@juliarosenberger@erpadvisorsgroup.com. That will be in the chat shortly for record, and you will be issued a certificate for CPE. At the end of today's presentation, there will be a short question and answer period. If you have a question for our presenter, please add it to the chat section of this Zoom. Sean Windle is our presenter for today. Sean is the founder and managing principal of ERP Advisors Group based in Denver, Colorado. Sean has worked in the enterprise software industry for over 20 years. He started his career at Accenture and Arthur Andersen Business Consulting and moved into the software industry with Oracle as a technology product manager. There are only a few people in the world with the practical software experience that Sean has gained, with helping hundreds of clients across many industries with selecting and implementing a wide variety of enterprise solutions. His podcast, the ERP Advisor, has dozens of episodes with thousands of downloads and is featured on prominent podcast platforms such as Apple and Spotify. Sean, if you are ready, I will pass it over to you for our presentation today.
Great. Let's do it. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great, Sean.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, let's jump in. As usual, love the questions in real time. If you want to send those over, Rebecca and Will can sort of man the chat here. And let's get into it. But before we do, remember us, ERP Advisors Group. We are one of the country's top independent enterprise software advisory firms, which basically means we just want you to be a success. And we're seeing that more and more and more, that this stuff is hard. ERP is not easy, but with the correct information and with a technology, if you will, of how to do it right, you can be successful with your ERP system. And that's really what we're all about. So with that said, let's jump into our deck here. So holy mackerel, do we have a lot of people coming off of legacy ERP applications right now? Wow, wow, wow. And when we're talking about ERP and legacy, we always like to start with definitions. And ERP, you can think about it like a software package. Like here's your ERP, like Amazon just delivered your ERP. Oh, great. I'm going to open it up and reach in and there's my ERP. You wish it was that easy. I do. But it's basically a software modules, lots of stuff that kind of comes together literally as a package that organizations, could be nonprofit, government, a lot of for-profit, could be public, private, et cetera. Basically everybody uses to automate business transactions and store and report on information generated from those processes. So it's not just like, hey, let's get the data in the system. And it's not just like, hey, let's get the data out of the system. Or it's not like, hey, let's just let the system do its thing. It's really all three of those. Put information in, there's processing, we get information out. Very basic. And when we talk about legacy ERP, that's really, really important because it really ultimately comes down to an ERP whose future viability is in question. Now, that's a pretty strong definition. We could say, oh, it's applications built on older technology platforms, or they're no longer supported, or whatever. But in reality, it really is about what's going to happen with this package that you're on. So, we've got these little tips. There's the little icon. I'm not wearing my white gloves today. But as it says below, gauge your legacy ERP's viability realistically, not idealistically. And that means on sort of both sides of the coin. Oh my gosh, we're on an old app and we need to get off of it. Well, do you really? Are there people that support it? Or the other side is, Oh, it works so well for our business, it's totally fine. Ooh, maybe there aren't people that support it. So there's just this evaluation. We're going to walk through that in the subsequent slides. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll totally understand what we're talking about and what you can do with a legacy ERP. Good. Let's go to the next one. So what's the problem, right? Ultimately, it comes down to most legacy ERPs, and frankly, to be considered a legacy ERP is really about support. So when we talk about support, we're talking about things like what happens if it breaks. That's very colloquial. Oh, my software broke. I've fallen and I can't get up, like, oh, it fell and it can't get up. What's going on with that? Well, maybe it doesn't work anymore. Well, why doesn't it work anymore? Right. There's all these kinds of like threads that stick out and you start pulling on them and you get to the end of it. And it's like, oh, because it was written on, Windows XP that's no longer supported by Microsoft and hasn't been for like 10 years or longer. And that technology platform doesn't work. The app is fine. So there's questions about what really broke. There's also questions about what if it can't be fixed? So you might be running on an app that's going fine today, but then what happens if that product can no longer actually be fixed if there's a problem in the future? And what happens if your employees can't work because the ERP broke down, right? Like your car, you can't get from A to B because your car broke down. Same thing for your employees. They can't, send out those invoices to your customers for you to get paid because the ERP broke. These are pretty basic questions, right? And then ultimately it leads down to a catastrophic failure, which would be your entire business stops working. So these are very simple points here that we're trying to make that, legacy ERP, one could consider that it is a little bit dangerous. And that's the thing that I think we are doing this presentation for, which is we don't want you to be in a dangerous situation. You don't need to be in a dangerous situation with the legacy ERP. You just need to work through the what ifs, like really take a look at, again, what if we don't get the regulatory updates to our ERP anymore? 1099 forms change and 1099s get created out of the ERP. What happens? Oh, we can just get a bolt-on app to do 1099s. Okay, fine. You might just mitigate that risk versus we have 4 employees who wrote the custom system and they're all at the point where they're begging to retire. Guess what? When those people walk out the door, so does all of that knowledge that's in their heads about how this application works, right? So, wow, maybe it is time for them to document more, but in actuality, maybe it's time to just switch to a new system. And so they can leave a legacy behind them. That's a great legacy. So there's a real reason why legacy ERP is a problem. But again, if you work through the what ifs, you're going to know what's going to happen, and then that'll lead to the right solution. So let's go to the next slide. So if you look at this this meme down here on the bottom right, of course, the guys picked Star Wars. Thank you, Will. We don't miss returning VHS tapes to the video store after movie night, right? I mean, there was always that terrible feeling that you had of like, oh my gosh, I got to stop by Blockbuster and drop this off, or the grocery store, or wherever you got your videos. And you didn't want to forget because then they would charge you for the extra fees. Exactly, right? Well, guess what? No one's going to miss your legacy ERP software either. It kind of turns out very often that despite the fact that millions of organizations, millions are running these legacy applications and many, many, many more that aren't even listed here, when you actually go through the effort of doing the migration, getting onto new software, it's okay. Like it's going to be okay. You might think it's not going to be okay, but in actuality, after going through the process with all of these applications and more that we've worked with, we get to the other side, you get through that phase 1 and you're like the phase 1 implementation, you're like, wow, that was a lot of work and it doesn't do this, this, and this. I got it. Just keep going. And then after a few years, you're back in a position where you were after 25 years with your legacy system, like the legacy VHS. I think that's a VHS tape. That's not a Betamax. What? That's like old school there. That's like OG. Anyway, but you feel like, wow, we don't even miss this thing at all, right? And it was scary, and there was a lot of emotion tied up in actually doing that. So once it's gone, very, very often these organizations feel a lot better about their future because, they're running the application, it runs the business. Pretty obvious there. Good. Next slide here. So how does this happen, right? If we know that legacy technology can be dangerous and that there's reasons why we shouldn't do it, well, why do we do it? And I mean this as a redemption slide. We're not going to make anybody wrong for doing what they're doing. That's not who we are. If you want that, you should go to our competitors. Oh, you guys do this and that, and how could you do it? Oh, you're terrible. We're more like, well, hey, look, we can improve this, this, and this. Glass half full. But seriously, when you understand how this happens, you'll see that it's not because we have bad people that are trying to protect our jobs or, we're just lazy or whatever. Like, no. Here's some key reasons. The first one is just over customizations. And this happens a lot. I can think of 7 examples in just the last several years where we had clients that had a mainstream ERP and they customized. And they got to a point where their partner said, look, if you upgrade, you're going to lose all your customizations, but we can rebuild those customizations, but it's going to be another $100,000 or $250,000 or whatever, even half $500,000 to rebuild those customizations. Oh, no. I don't need that. That's okay, right? We're going to just stick with what we got. Okay, good luck with that, right? And then the partner kind of walks away like, oh no, I don't know if they know what they just did. But it is true that you could, the way the architectures were written on these applications is you could build in so many customizations that the app literally, you just couldn't update it. So I think that's pretty obvious to most people in the industry, but it's technical reasons that occurred. Now, the good news is since about 2004, when ASP, if you remember that phrase, was really becoming the model that most of these applications were being offered around, application service provider, which then became cloud. The applications were written for extensibility. That's like when you hear extensibility, your ears should always be like, wait a minute, are you just saying customization? Yeah, actually, we are. So there was a fundamental technology shift in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, to where enterprise apps were built to be able to be extended significantly, where you wouldn't break the your mainline code by putting in customizations. But unfortunately, a lot of apps written, the technology platforms written before then, they didn't have that. Now, another thing that can happen is that the product itself, it can just be outdated. So maybe you're fine with you didn't go over customized, but you got busy, you didn't take an upgrade. And then the next year you're going through some mergers and you're trying to do some other stuff, didn't take the upgrade. And then you go another year and you're just too busy and don't take that upgrade. And then the 4th year, you're like, okay, usually a new person comes in, frankly, and says, okay, we got to get this software up to date. Oh, okay, well, good luck with that because you're 4 upgrades or 3 upgrades behind. So guess what? Now you have to do an entire new implementation, especially over the last, again, 15 years, 20 years. These products have changed so much that the amount of catch up, sort of technology legacy assets that you would have to bring into present time to get your application sort of updated were so significant. There's so many changes that happened that, even Microsoft Dynamics 365 GP or Great Plains back in the day, a 2015 version to a 2019 version is pretty significant, the amount of changes. So because there were all these changes every year, you end up, missing the upgrades, and then you're like hosed when you're like, okay, I'm ready to upgrade. Like, okay, well, we're actually going to have to re-implement. Oh, so now you're on legacy software. Ugh. The third point here is the app itself, maybe it gets purchased, or the vendor decides to not support it anymore. So there's some strategic reason by the software vendor why they just aren't going to support this thing, whatever it is. Usually, hopefully, very honestly, it has to do with market share and profitability. That if an app is fairly profitable and the app has pretty high market share, they're usually going to continue to support it. I mean, look at Oracle; they still support a lot of these legacy apps that they purchased over the years. But sometimes they don't support earlier versions of those apps, and they'll basically sunset it. So we've even seen this with other vendors to where they say, okay, we purchased this app, and several years later, like 2 years, they just say, no, we're not going to support it. So that forces an upgrade. Wow, that sucks, but it can happen. So you really do need to have an open communication line with your software vendor to really see where they're going into the future and what just makes sense, right? I mean, you can call us anytime on any software vendor, and even if it's Odo or Udo, and what's the economics behind their business model, and we'll talk through that with you, and you'll understand better what Appian is really doing. Or Infor had purchased literally well over 50 apps several years ago. We had no idea which ones were going to be the go forward platform apps. Now we know that, so we feel better about getting our clients onto specific applications that will be supported in the future. I'll tell you, this last one is a big deal too. We have a lot of clients that come to us saying, oh, my legacy application is terrible, we need to replace it. Well, why? And we go in and we really understand that the actual fundamental app itself is okay. There are some support people that we can get, but they can't do the really cool things that are outside their organization with other enterprise applications, or even things that would help to sort of catch them up with the modern way of doing business. I mean, the things that are listed here have been around forever, but I have to bring up AI. I had to do it. How far did I get in? 17 minutes, not bad. AI, I wouldn't say to a client, wow, you have legacy technology because you don't have enough AI. Therefore, you need to go to a new app to get more AI. We're not there yet. We will be, but we're not even close to that yet. But even just fundamental technology shifts around e-com and integrations, and even like very specialized functionality around warehouse management, inventory management, not just barcode scanners and UPC labels and other things. I mean, we talked about blockchain and things like that in the past. But it really is about what are these fundamental technology shifts that are occurring in your vertical or your micro vertical in your industry that are going to impact your technology, right? I mean, we've got clients in food and beverage, we have industrial manufacturing, we have professional services, we have nonprofit, we have a quasi government. I can tell you the specific technology trends that are affecting each one of those industries. The legacy apps aren't made to support those. So when your customers, your vendors, your stakeholders outside your organization are forcing you to do business with them differently, and you can't do it with your app, well, that's when you've got legacy application, and you have a big frown on the computer screen. But don't worry, we're going to take that frown and we're going to turn it upside down. Here we go. Good. So as usual, if we were software salespeople, we'd say, oh my God, you got to change, right? And I love them. I love those guys. But we asked this question first. And we want you to put this into your mindset. You're probably already doing this, but we want to like cement in this decision. Should you stay or should you go? That's a process to go through to make that decision as adequately and as informed as you need to be. There's a certain point where you will find some, we call them senior datum, where you're like, whoa, we're losing business because our customers are demanding I don't want to say EDI because we've kind of handled that, but our customers are demanding that we give them our product information in a format that a product information management system would need to suck into their catalog so that their customers can see our stuff. They can see our real-time inventory. Again, I know these are problems from 20 years ago, but look, most of our clients are still working through these kinds of things, right? So, you know, should we change or should we not? And these are some of the key questions that you have to look at. So is the system still performing the way the business needs it to? And that's what I'm trying to say about these technology shifts, that your business has to change. There's this concept of, Uberizing. Who's going to Uber our micro vertical, right? Even working with the most, what you would think would be the simplest business models of steel distributors. We had a client that said, "Oh, we're going to completely change this industry with technology." And that was their choice, right? Their business was shifting. And so they really did have to look at, okay, our current system can't even come close to handling this. Was AS400 based system where it's basically all flat files. And they were trying to get data in real time to make better purchasing and sales pricing decisions. And it would take forever to get that information. So, you really do have to look at business needs and then look at the gaps that your system has for meeting those needs. This is why on every single sales call that we have with a new client, we always say, well, before you do the selection, which is what you think you want to do, you really need to do a needs analysis. And they say, oh, it's fine. We just get our requirements. No. Needs and requirements are two different things, right? It's like, oh, I just told one of my staff members not to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's like deciding between what kind of car to buy, right? What mode of transportation? You want an SUV? Do you want a sedan? You want a sports car? Do you want a semi truck? Do you want one of those little slingshot things that has the two wheels and the one wheel in the back? Like you have to decide what you need at a high level from kind of a car, and then you can start talking about how fast it goes from 0 to 60, or what kind of engine, or what kind of electronic components are within it, right? You have to sort of do high level needs first, and then dive into your business requirements. And the other thing here, and number two, is the system support really not available? So we had a client that was on there's all this lawsuit stuff. So not with us, but with this software vendor and the support company. So I'm not going to talk about it too much, but we had a client that had customized the H literally out of their legacy application. And to change would have costed about $500,000. And I think over 3 years, I think we calculated it was going to be $750,000. Private equity wanted to sell soon, and we knew the ROI model would take another couple years after the implementation, and after kind of recovering some costs here to actually see some ROI. And so we said, look, don't change. Like, there's no way that you're going to be able to justify this investment. Really look into your market and see if there were some other support options. And there actually were. So they stayed on that platform, and that was totally fine. Right now, whoever buys them next is probably going to have to do the upgrade, but that's fine. Is the technology infrastructure outdated? You really do have to take a look at this. I think, I don't think this is as big as a problem today, but it still is. I mean, we saw it through COVID, people moving to the cloud for basic stuff, certainly for like Teams and things like that. But even for ERP, a lot of these apps do run on infrastructure that's outdated. And, again, here I am 24 minutes into this call, and I have another horror story. I guess my first horror story was AI that I talked about first. Yeah. We had a client. Actually, one of the few clients that we did a needs and a selection for, out of like 500, that their implementation just was very, very rocky. It was taking a while, wasn't going well. And we even had to work very closely with the vendor to get something solved. The vendor actually gave them some credits back. It was actually really pretty cool, but they still weren't implementing. Well, one day they came in on a Monday morning and the entire network had been breached and they had a cybersecurity attack. And the old app that they were running their business from was on those servers, and wham, it got wiped out. They could have paid a gazillion dollars to get it back, but they even if they did get it back, they didn't think it would come back in any kind of shape that they could still use it. And they're in the middle of this cloud-based ERP implementation. So all of a sudden, everybody was really behind the implementation process. Yay. Oh Lord. So they did go live, and we were very thankful for that. That was one of those times where you sort of look up and you say, "Thank you for getting that project done." I wish they didn't have to go through that, but because their network was legacy infrastructure and outdated infrastructure, and their app, the ERP app itself, was outdated, they just got whammed. So that wasn't very good. So they had no choice but to go. Would changing the software cause more problems than upgrading? Now, this is absolutely vital. We look at this for every single project because, we're at a very prominent company right now that we just literally were presenting here this afternoon, and we're saying to them, your upgrade is going to cause you problems. You have a lot of people that are not used to working with new systems, but you have some that really need that to happen. And if you don't make the change, you're probably going to lose some of the people that are really your leaders, your future leaders in the organization. But you really do have to look at, okay, we're just going to go get a new ERP and just plop it in, it'll be fine. No. Like, what really is going to happen after day one, right? After you get set in the application? The best example of this is in field services, where you have, maybe hundreds or thousands of people out in the field. And one day they're going to come into the office and all of a sudden everything's going to change for them. Is that really going to be helpful, right? What are you really trying to solve to incur that kind of risk? Man, you better be very clear on how you're going to resolve the problems that could occur from upgrading. We have another company we just talked to recently where they haven't contemplated this at all, and it kind of shows me that they're a little bit irresponsible, right? Don't be irresponsible. Don't do that. But I know we need to change. Okay, good. That's amazing. You're right. You're on this old app. You need to get onto a new platform. Great. But what are the problems that are going to happen? And what are the mitigations for that? Oh, the software vendor is just going to take care of that. The implementation partner is going to take care of that. Yeah, that doesn't work that way. We'll get to that later. And then the last thing is, is there a real migration path? So very often vendors, especially as they're moving towards more cloud solutions, they're probably already there, or they bought a lot of apps and they're trying to move you to the NG, the next generation solution or whatever. We have a migration path to go from this to that. Really dig in and understand what that migration path is. Oh, I did. I asked them and they said there is one. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. No. Like, how does it really work? How does your data get migrated? Oh, it just, we push a button and it works. It doesn't work. It's never that easy. It could be because the database structure actually didn't change, but the UI and the business logic changes. Okay, that the business logic layer changes. Okay, fine. That actually makes sense, right? But wait a minute, the database didn't change. You're really just sticking this instance up in the cloud instead of it just being on my server, right? Well, yeah, single tenant cloud installation, it's called. Well, what's the difference between what I'm doing now and that, right? Just ask basic questions when you have a migration path that's being offered to you by your software vendor. Basic. And if you don't get basic answers back, they don't know what they're talking about. So you better be careful with that, right? And say, oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, let me talk to 4 people who've done this recently. Please give me their names and number. And then you can talk to those people and hear what's really happening. So those are some key decisions. Definitely starts off with what you're really what your business needs are, but keep those questions in mind for sure. All right. So I've been talking for a half hour. Now it's time for you to participate. So here's the first question. Again, for CPE, you do need to answer this. So wake up. Here we go. What is a specific reason a system needs to be left behind? A, over customization, rendering the system obsolete. B, or the second one here, outdated product due to missed upgrades. C, the system is no longer supported or is being sunsetted, or all the above. We'll give you a couple minute or so here to answer that. Okay, it looks like we're getting some answers in now. Again, it's I feel kind of bad when we have companies that are growing and they're, great people and everything, and then they're like, we're ready to grow, and we have this application from the Star Wars era of VHS tapes. I'm like, oh no. It's a lot of work. But I'm just going to say this too. At some point, somebody's got to take responsibility to get these systems into more modern times. And a lot of times those people are our clients. And I just think they're ballers. They're incredible people for taking on the risk. All right. So I think that's good. Yep. Perfect. So the correct answer, of course, is D, all of the above. Good reasons to look at changing. All right. Go to the next slide. So there's another point about legacy technology that I think our prospects are aware of. But again, we have a meeting later on today, and we're basically going to say to this client, like, you will lose people if you don't make this change. Now, we're also going to say it's a little bit crazy that you haven't done it already. You're profitable, but right now, those same people that would leave, they're going to be able to help you to get from where you're at to where you're going. Again, I'm going to come back to that. But I mean, if you think about it, I remember when I met Erica, actually my business partner here in the company, and I had this iPhone. Well, she had an iPhone too, but mine had a purple case on it. And these, we had these kids, these tiny kids, and they were like, "Wow, this thing is so cool," And now my kids would just take that thing and like they would think it's like a rock that you're supposed to skip across the the lake because it's so outdated, right? Well, how's your ERP? Everybody can remember those Windows, those Microsoft. I don't know if that's XP or what. Oh yeah, I think it actually is Microsoft Windows version something. A lot has changed since those days. So ERPs have too. And what is really this impact on your people? And especially, we call them high-performing entry-level people. They are attracted to organizations by technology. It's something that is important to them, that they know that they're learning with tools and techniques that are going to help them throughout the rest of their careers. And the more state-of-the-art technology that can really be a major factor on why somebody chooses to work with you or not. Now, others that's not applicable in your industry, but when they come in and they start working and you start showing them the green screen and they're like, where's the mouse? Where's the slide tracker? Where is that? And you're like, oh, you just use hotkeys. Like, what are those for? It sets something up here in their mind where they're like, oh, well, if you're not willing to invest in technology, how much are you willing to invest in me? So just be aware of that. Definitely, when you have high performers and you give them slow systems, I mean, you can have holes in your wall from them, picking up the keyboard and just saying, just chuck it. I'm done. I did that one time with my son's shoe in the car. He was like throwing it, like beating his sister with it. And I said, "Oh, stop this. I'm gonna throw it out the window." And he didn't stop. And I grabbed it and hucked it out the window. We all kind of looked at each other like, "Oh, I probably shouldn't have done that." That's kind of how it is when your system is really slow, though, where you're like, "Oh, geez, I probably shouldn't have done that." So it is a factor that can increase turnover when systems just don't operate that well. Definitely new people, when they don't know how to use a system, they get very frustrated, they get misunderstandings, they blow. And even the experience that an employee has with like human capital management, benefits, payroll, those kinds of systems, it can make a big difference when they have a pretty modern app that they're working with versus something that Fred Flintstone used back in the day. No offense to Fred, but nobody wants to be a Fred. And I tell you this other piece about AI, it is very real, because I do think, especially the generation that's entering the workforce today, they know that life is going to be very different 10 years from now. They know the automation capabilities, and they're looking at their future employers or their current employers and saying, well, it's like almost the opposite of what you would think. Oh my gosh, they're going to install AI and, I'm going to lose my job. I think it's actually the opposite. Like, if we don't start using AI, we could lose our position here in the marketplace, and even my own skill set could be gone. So, you have to look at this legacy technology impact on your people too, because it's a real thing. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So we found this, which was pretty interesting, that the need for employee experience with ERP, it's pretty high, and just with systems in general. And so that concept is something you can't forget, that the end user experience and employee experience is a big deal for people. It's a very big deal, especially after the pandemic, but even before. But we basically now have organizations that are completely virtual, and the only way that they interact with each other is through technology. So when you don't have that right technology, especially again, as the enterprise, right, is brought together by these different platforms, it will impact your people, and they will get frustrated, and they're going to quit. So it's not the vast majority of people, but you can see that, but there's, 49% of those surveys that they're frustrated with the technology provided by their organization. So it's just an awareness that I think most owners and C-level and our sponsors have of how their people feel about the technology. But this is a good reminder that it's very, very real, and something that you should keep in mind for sure. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out and buy the latest and greatest, whatever, but it is just another reason why, as you're looking at your legacy technology, that might be time to do something about it. Good. So here's our next question. I love those memes. True or false? Outdated technology can drive employees to quit. True or false? Kind of a silly question, but it is absolutely important that we sort of recognize this. I personally don't see anything wrong with that TV. I definitely was the remote control, where my parents would say, Sean, get up, turn the channel. Okay. I was the remote control. There you go. That's how you know a child of the 80s. Good. All right. We'll just wrap this up. And again, yep, the answer here, of course, is true. And it only takes that one really good person that's really committed to the business, who just says, I can't do this anymore. There might be other things going on. I get it. Maybe your competitor gave them a lot more money or whatever, but it just takes that one person leaving where you're like, oh, wow, we got to do something about this. Or even worse, that great employee or potential employee who says, this is great. I love this. Wait a minute. What kind of system do you use? You want me to use what? Actually, I have another call to take, right? So beware. Now you are. Now you know. Good. Okay. So you have an ERP legacy system. You've looked at your needs. You decided, do I really need to do this? You've looked at the impacts of change. You have some concept of that, but I do want to get into a little bit more of what these risks are when you're upgrading a legacy ERP. I don't think. Let me see. Derailing the quotation. Yeah, I think there's some new stuff on here. I think if the question didn't get your attention, I really do want you to look at this, because I think this is probably like almost 30 years of hundreds and hundreds of projects for me to be able to communicate these couple things with my team. I think it's probably more the team too, and their experience, to be able to say these things to you guys. But users need to buy in from the beginning. Now, sometimes users do not see the need for a new system. That is very obvious. But when's the beginning? That's the thing that's not so obvious. Well, when we implement, we got to have these guys involved in training, and we need them to be willing to come to courses. And we need them to be sometimes even willing to do the training for others. And ooh, if that's the first time you thought about buy-in, you are going to fail. And I mean that. And we have some companies that call us. We just had one recently that said, "Oh yeah, we went through a whole selection process and we picked an app and we're going to roll it out. And then, we'll just work with the end users on it in the training." And I'm like, okay, oh, wait, what time is it? Looking at my hand that doesn't have my watch. Oh, shoot, I got another appointment. Hey, good luck with that. See you later. Because it's not going to work. You have to get buy-in from the very, very, very beginning. Now, there's usually a core group of people. It might even be one person that's like, oh my gosh, we got to change. We heard ERP Advisor's presentation. We got to do this. Good. Now, when you're defining the needs, get the key stakeholders involved then. It's okay to go to others and say, hey, what do you think of this system? How's this working for you? What's broken? What would you rather have? I don't know. But this does take a long time to do stuff. And I did lose that great recruit last week because they saw the blue screen and they ran with like their hair on fire out of the room. And Sally, who wrote the app, she does want to retire, and she's only 95 years old now. I mean, she's still got another good 10 years in her, but serious. We have a client that has a 90-year-old person supporting their app. Anyway, start early with the buy-in. Start defining the needs with the team. And maybe, fine, you go get all the needs, but then you go back to this core stakeholder team, these executives, these people that run these divisions, these departments, and you come back to them and say, guys, this is what I think we need, and this is what I think we got to do about it. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree, et cetera? Sometimes the private equity ownership or some other outside stakeholder, somebody on the board or the CEO just says, okay, we got to change software, go. Okay, well, even then, somebody's usually assigned as the lead. That lead should go do this and get these needs and everything else and get the buy-in up front, because I will tell you this, mark my words, if you don't get the buy-in up front, you ain't getting it at the end. That is not going to happen, because it's only going to get harder, and you're going to only ask more and more and more of your people. And by the time you get to training and even go live, they're like usually tired. So if you didn't get their buy-in, they're like, forget this. Man, I could go on and on and on about that. But that's enough. Now, the next point here, concern that some staff will not accept a new application. That's true, and they should probably quit. I said it. There will be some people that don't agree with the change. And if the change really does meet the needs and the needs really are real, I often wonder, how much do those people care about the long-term benefit of the organization? Or are they really just focused on themselves? It's not atypical that when we go into a selection or a needs analysis and selection process, whoop, somebody from the client side leaves, and we're like, oh yeah, they're done. They don't want to go through this. Fine, that's great, but the rest of us do, because it's the right thing to do. And we should put our little t-shirt logo on here. Users want too many customizations, derailing an implementation. This is the problem with customizations, man. This is a nugget. Everybody listen. If you're listening to this as a podcast later and you're on your treadmill, stop the treadmill. I'm going to tell you the secret of customizations. Nobody really wants them. But what ends up happening is there's a developer, a configurator, financials functional consultant working with the controller of one division somewhere. And that controller in that one division says, oh, wow, the way we do procurement or purchase order approval, well, it might be a bad example. The way we do bank reconciliations is like this. And the configurator is like, oh my gosh, it doesn't work that way. But you know what? I can do this one little thing over here to make that work. You can? Okay, well, would you do it? Sure. Okay, great. And then the person, says, okay, yeah, they build it. And then they show it to the person, to the client. The client says, that's not quite right, because we need to bring in send a notch file, but we also have to send a file for Europe to Italy, which is a different format. Oh, okay. I'll go do the research and figure that out and come back to you. Okay. And then they're do. And then they're like, hey, they come to a great solution and everything's fine, right? And then, 3 years from now, you do the customization and that bank recon functionality breaks because it's a customization. How did that happen? The developer was just doing his job. The controller's just doing their job. What's the problem? The problem is, who paid for that? Did either of them pay for that customization? No. The company did. The owners did. And the owner said, I don't want any customization. So what should they have done? Right. And ultimately it's on both sides. It's the developer and it is on the client side, on even the lowest level staff member who says, I want this, the app doesn't do it. Wait a minute, is that a customization? But it's also on the developer who says, well, I get that you want that, but the app doesn't do it, but I can build it for you. That's a customization. So you've got to like it just completely all the way from the top down through the whole organization, get like commitment that people aren't going to go do a bunch of silly stuff off to the side that then leads you in a direction later where you're hosed. That's how it really happens. Nobody really wants it, but it just happens because you have a great developer who wants to solve a business problem. That's totally fine, but then they need to pay for it. Right. And that's where you say, okay, look, if it's going to be additional, you got to go back to the project team. We got to get approval for it, et cetera, et cetera. It's totally fine. So easy. I didn't mention that to our clients we're working with now that spent 4 years customizing and millions of dollars in. Okay. Some other risks here. There are some times where the users are unable to adapt to a new system where the system is sort of built, not contemplating everybody's needs, and you roll it out and folks say like, I can't use this, right? Obvious example, field services, and it doesn't work remotely or offline, right? Simple things like that can happen, and you really do have to watch out for that. Definitely people are concerned about their job security due to process automation. Typically what happens is when we automate processes, it allows people to do the sort of next level up of value add that they wanted to do anyway in their careers. They didn't get into their career in accounting to, create trial balances. They wanted to go in to understand the trends and things that were happening in the business to make better decisions from, right? So if we can get a trial balance done faster with automation, let's do it. But sometimes people worry about that. And the other thing here is that some folks think that new ERP or digital transformation in general is just the latest fad. Oh, whatever. We got so many things that our CEO does. This is just like a little fad that's just going to go away. And, we just need to kind of focus on the business here. Well, no, that's something that should be identified. This is why we survey throughout the multiple points in the process, especially in the implementation of these key users to say, what do you really think about this new ERP? It's objective. We try to get the real feedback from peeps so that you know what's really going on in their minds, and then you can mitigate those risks. So very mitigatable. That's the bottom line, no matter how many gears there are. Here's the next question. So which of the following is not a common change management risk associated with upgrading a legacy ERP system? So the first one is users unable to adopt to a new system. Employees may worry about job security due to process automation. Users don't care what the company does. Some employees think digital transformation means the latest fad. So this is a good question. It's a little tricky, but not if you're listening. It should be pretty obvious. But what we find is at least 80% of all employees actually, they really do want to do the right thing. Now, the other 20%, you got other problems beyond ERP. But the vast, vast majority of people really want to do the right thing. They want to do the right thing for themselves, for their colleagues, their peers, even their managers, executives, their staff members underneath them. But they really want to do the right thing for the company, right? So it's funny that we'll come here and wrap this up. Perfect. So the answer here is, go to the next slide. C. It's funny, very rarely are we in a circumstance where the users are like, look, I'm just going to tell you something. I don't really care what happens with this company. Like that has never happened in my entire career. That has never happened in my entire career. Most people want the right thing. They really do care. And so you can't just say, oh, these people just don't care about the system. And that's why they don't care about the company. And that's why they're not accepting the system. That's just not true. That's lazy. If I hear an executive or one of our sponsors says something like that, I get the job of slamming in their ethics, where I have to say, excuse me, sir, that's not true. There's something else that's going on. Let's dig in a little bit more. Oh, we offered 2 training classes. Oh, well, of course, because everybody's busy. Okay, well, we have fire departments that we've had training for, where we've offered training at 3 a.m. in the morning, during the day, at night, on the weekends. You do a ton of courses so that at some point somebody hits it, you track it all, you make sure they're fine, you send them a survey afterwards, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can totally handle that. So don't take that ever as an excuse that, oh, they just don't care. That's just not the case. All right. Now we got about 10 minutes left here. So Rebecca, pace me here on the slides, if you would, on what's remaining, and definitely we can leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So how do you manage your workforce's expectations and responses to new systems? Here's some very specific things that I've actually already given you a few pointers on already. Maybe that fourth one I haven't talked about, which is you really have to understand when you implement one of these new ERPs, who is the implementation team, right? Oh, it's the implementation partner. Yeah, that's exactly right. They're going to do the technical configuration of the software. But who's going to tell them what to build? Who's going to tell them what they build was wrong? Who's going to tell them what they build twice, the build was still wrong? Who's going to tell them that what they built was wrong? Who's going to tell them what they built was right? And then who's going to train the trainer? And then when you train that trainer, who's going to help the trainer or who's going to train your end users? Who's going to check the data at go live to make sure it's correct? Who's going to, buy the gifts, which we do, at least some cookies, for go live to make sure that people are taken care of, right? That's your team. Like, the internal team has so much responsibility on an ERP change, and it still is like this huge misconception. Don't we have like a white paper on the misconceptions of ERP implementations? Maybe we should grab that and put that link in the chat here. It's phenomenal. And so now you have these key employees that are involved in the implementation. They're like, oh, wow, you just gave me a night job. I have a day job. Maybe you should think about some extra incentives for those people. So there's a whole thing on that. But again, we'll put that link to that paper in here. And it really is important that, you really do have a communication plan. It often gets forgotten because there's so many activities that are going on that you really do want to ensure that even your stakeholders, maybe even outside of your company, know what's happening once you know for sure when you're going live. For instance, with customers, if you're changing something about their experience, you should let them know, or vendors even. So that communication plan isn't just people internally that are using the new software, and it's not just people that use the reports from the new software, like the bank. You might, there's that link too, by the way, if you want to see that white paper on implementation misconceptions. But it might be your bank. You might call the bank and say, hey, guess what? We're going to a new ERP, and I know you need that covenant reporting by this date. Can you give me an extra 30 days? Yeah, of course. Oh, wow. That's amazing, right? So when you think about communication plan, think about who's impacted, what do you need to tell them, when do you need to tell them, and tell them, and then did it get done, right? There's a little tracker that we actually have around that too. So good things that are actually real for managing those expectations. Next slide. So here's our fourth question. I think it's the last one. True or false? You can successfully manage workforce response to new systems with the right plan. True or false? I love that question. Because when you're in the middle of it, or you're at the beginning of it, you could be like, what have I done? The reality is that you can actually like plan for these things, and you can put in place mitigations for what you know is going to happen in advance for sure. So the answer to this question is true, of course. Good. I can tell you though, 80% of the ERP projects fail because they didn't do what was just on that last slide. Ours don't, by the way. Good. All right. So now let's talk about a summary here. There are a number of reasons that businesses move on from their legacy ERP systems, and no two situations are exactly the same. Even if you have the same engineering firm that's on the same legacy app, all my other peer company did it, so I have to do it. No, you don't. You really have to look at sort of what's specific to your unique environment, and you need to do that. Technology does play an important role in attracting and retaining employees. I think most people know that, but it is pretty interesting when we've had clients that have legacy apps and then they change over to something newer. What happens with recruiting and attaining people for the long term, attracting and retaining people for the long term. It makes a big difference. Absolutely. A plan can help mitigate change management risks associated with upgrading legacy ERP. And I'm not talking about some ginormous, guilty, big four plan that costs $450,000 to put together that nobody can use plan. I'm talking about like, get a spreadsheet and just bam, 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 bam. Oh, we need to add this. Okay, add it there. Oh, we need to add this, add it there. Good, done. 10 steps. I don't know, 4 steps. These don't have to be some ginormous thing. They just have to be actionable. When we say well-crafted plan, that's what we mean. So it's vital that you have that plan in place. And man, if I was going through this, I'd call us on a heartbeat. We do all kinds of free stuff all the time and, advise people. Sometimes we do like, buy an hour with the advisor, with the expert, or, some kind of expert situation, like an arrangement where we're just doing some hours, or we do a whole project or whatever. Like, you don't have to go through this alone. There's so many lessons learned. And especially for organizations, companies like us, where we do this all the time, I don't know, probably going to talk to like 30 different organizations today that are going through this. We know the things to do and not to do. And Erica's free ERP advisory service, she's always available to help out also, and can give some great advice. I think that's it. We've got here, I think our next slide is Rebecca. Our next event. Yeah. So this is pretty cool. We are doing this case study series on like actual projects that have occurred and like what's really happened and what people have done. So this one's pretty interesting on recovering from a failed ERP implementation. Sometimes we get clients that call us and say, well, our project didn't go so well. Can you help us? And sometimes we say, I'm sorry, we can't. But a lot of times we say, yeah, here's some things we can do. So we're going to talk about some of those things here on Thursday, July 18th. We'd love to have you all join us for that.
Wonderful. I'm going to take over from you, Sean, and I'll just do some wrap up. Erica, I know if you're listening, you sent the link to that white paper that we do have, but it was just to the host and the panelists. So I'm going to ask you to send that in the other chat. It is not publicly available. So if any of you have any trouble viewing it, please do send us an email and we can get that link over to you. And thank you, Sean, for all of this great information. Always so much on these calls. Learn something new every time. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us for our webinar. If you have any questions about today's presentation, please do let us know. You can call or email us, and we are happy to help in any way that we can. Also, if you would like a copy of the deck from today's presentation, please let us know. And again, if you need CPE credit for today's presentation and you answered each of the polling questions, please send an email to Julia at julia.rosenberger@erpadvisorsgroup.com. That email is in the chat to everyone. Be sure to join us for our next webinar scheduled for next Thursday, not next Thursday, our next webinar scheduled for Thursday, July 18th, ERP Implementation Case Study Series, Recovering from a Failed ERP Implementation, where Sean will explore case studies of clients who came to us after a failed ERP implementation and how we were able to lead them to a successful go live. This is the last installment of our ERP Implementation Case Study Series, so don't miss out. And please go to our website, erpadvisorsgroup.com, for more details and to register. ERP Advisors Group is one of the country's top independent enterprise software advisory firms. ERP Advisors Group advises mid to large size clients, businesses on selecting and implementing business applications from enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, human capital management, HCM, business intelligence, and other enterprise applications, which equate to millions of dollars in software deals each year across many industries. I don't see any specific questions, so I think we're going to wrap it up today. But thank you, Sean, once again, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Hope it was helpful.